Hey, can you hear me now?
Modern technology in action. Yeah, I gotcha.
You made it. Wow. Jody, is your day going okay so far, aside from the Zoom technology?
Zoom technology. You're talking to a guy that not only made a record with technology that I didn't think I could use. I was the last guy in the band to ever get email. Okay, so this is kind of a maiden voyage for me. It's all right, though.
That's great to hear, and I see a great guitar collection behind you. Wow.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to my man cave. It's a glorified storage unit with a lot of musical equipment and some semi-clean laundry.
Right on. I know that you've finished a solo record, but what are you up to these days? You're kind of a mystery all this time later.
Well, I split New York for LA about probably around the last time I saw you. What was that, 2012, 13, something like that?
Yeah, like that, yeah.
And, I was probably going to move back to New York, but it just doesn't seem like the time makes any sense to do that right now, to say the least. I was up there last week, and, wow, it was almost unrecognizable. So I'm down near Asheville. I'm like one town away from Asheville. That's my hub. And it's pretty chill down here. I like it. There's no distractions, so it's a pretty easy record to make. With me, I thought Pro Tools was a fad, like 8-track tapes, right? And meanwhile, everybody else is really getting up to it, and I had to learn. So that's why this record's taken about 2 years to do.
Right. The last record, I feel that this is a sonic step up from it. Like it's stylistically the same kind of thing where it's great sounding guitars and wonderful production, but I think that you stepped up the guitar tones even more on this one.
I'll tell you what, I have a house that's up at the end of this, what do you want to call it? Well, I'm on a mountain, so up the drive, you could call it, and that's really the living space. So I come down here to do this, and it's got a better acoustics in here. It's much better with the cathedral style ceilings. So yeah, it kind of has become my home away from home, which is only about 100 yards away.
and North Carolina has been responsible for so many great artists, but there's really not anything that connects it all together. For example, like if you talk about the DBs, and I think Mammoth Records was headquartered and all that. Do you see any people, well, COVID aside, do you see any like-minded musicians out there regularly?
Strangely enough, I have come into contact with a bass player about town who's also donated a lot of his great backing vocals to this record. His name is Ian Herod, and I'd be hard-pressed to say there's a bunch of them, but he's certainly the pinnacle, and he's going to be in the touring group, and we're allowed to tour. So it was a good meeting.
Who else is going to be in the touring group? Are you allowed to say?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I think it's going to fluctuate a little bit depending on where we're going.
Yeah.
I got some guys out on the West Coast, Brian in particular, who played on, the lion's share of the drum tracks on this record. And a guy in Virginia who's permanently lent me this mobile studio, which I've done the record on. And he also is going to be drumming for certain, what do you want to call it, markets? Are there still markets out there? I don't know.
Markets.
We're looking forward to doing it. Everybody really wants to do it. And I went so far as to buy a minivan right around the time of all this nasty. And was prepared to put a hitch on it and go out and at least do some reasonable regional warm-up shows. And unfortunately, that's not going to happen for a while, but everybody's sort of waiting in the wings, so we'll get it on when we can.
Yeah, I don't think everybody who's a fan of yours realizes that before Founds of Wayne that you were a totally signed artist with the Belltower and all that. And in a way, your music's kind of come full circle with that kind of sound. Is that fair to say?
I think it is, yeah. It's sort of like a revisitation of what I never got around to finishing. And, back in the day when Steve Sutherland coined it shoegaze,
yeah,
it wasn't necessarily a complimentary thing. It sort of meant like British working class, middle class, I should say, bands with cardigans and stuff, looking at their pedals, and I brought the pedals back for this one for sure. But yeah, it was just I felt like I'd done enough power pop stuff with the Fountains. I'm proud of those records as well, but to just sort of go out a little bit more experimental wise and see what else would come of it.
Yeah. And with Belltower, a lot of people must have thought that you were British based on the fact that you were a UK signing and all that. Do you still have people that are assuming that you're British?
No one that has actually spoken to me. You can tell by the accent. It went away. I was there for about 3 years though. And you got used to going to the, the bodega, if you will. And instead of saying, I'll have 20 Marlboros, you'd have to say, I'd like to have a pack of 20 Marlboros, or, 10 Rothmans, please. And otherwise they'd be like, sorry. So you got used to the lingo, I guess, a little bit. And whatever else rubbed off on it. I mean, that sound to me, really the godfather of that, it wasn't even a guitar player. And I cite Brian Eno as, the Neil Young of grunge is to Brian of shoegaze. So we're sitting over here with our pedals and our guitars and we want to sound like a synthesizer sometimes or whatever, you know what I mean? It's not like riff rock or whatever, it's more ethereal.
Did you have a lot of stuff in general canceled as a result of COVID? Like, was there a lot on the books?
No, there really wasn't, but I was thinking there would be and should be. But this record, you got to understand, I moved back to England and started writing it on the iPad with the GarageBand just to demo it up. And started it 2 years ago around this time, right? So this would be the appropriate time to be under the cans for the next quarantine while, as Stephen calls it. But sure enough, it was in the can by February of this year. And, due to my illiteracy when it comes to technology, it took me a while to build it up. But that's how I always used to write back in the day, before the Belltower even. Kind of as I recorded it, I'd tweak it and then stuff would change. It wasn't like I brought the song in or that we were in the studio in a block out, 8-hour sessions and had to pay for it. So it allowed me a little bit of time to be a bit complacent, which I think helped what, came of it actually. Yeah.
Well, to recap a few things you said. So last time I saw you was maybe 2012, 2013 in New York. You were in LA. You moved back to England, North Carolina. You must be really good at moving, packing.
I've done it every 2 years, usually since the age of 19 when I first did move from South Carolina, Charleston, to New York. And that was really the start of what became the Belltower, but we moved to England to actually launch that band. And, I have to say, I didn't have particularly fun. I was too young just for all that shit. You know what I mean? It was like cover of Indie Me, and it's like, we're not quite ready. And I was always content to kind of stay indie and not sign to a major. I felt like that was an achievement all of its own. But then stuff happened where everybody wanted to pay back studio bills from days of yore and all that. So we went ahead and did it, and ultimately I think that's kind of what got in the way of us continuing.
But still, I'm sure you're proud of the sound, the records themselves. It's just, hey, not the greatest memories associated with the business.
It was just a bit of culture shock that at my age I wasn't quite prepared for. Obviously, I loved all the music that came out of there and showed up, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but by the end of it, I was just like, I want to go watch David Letterman. I miss my home in the United States of the Americas. So that, we brought it back here, and we actually got really good, in my opinion. We scaled down to a 3-piece.
Yeah.
And, we made some recordings, but we never released any of them. So it was artistically, it was a good move. Professionally, it maybe wasn't so much. We probably should have stayed, but hindsight's 20/20, as they say.
Yeah. When I think about your career overall, you basically got to do every cool thing that a musician would want to do when they think about music as a career, getting to play on TV and film compositions, getting to do arena tours, because I remember there's the Matchbox 20 tour, and of course all the other Shed stuff with Smashing Pumpkins and all of that.
Yeah.
Got to do all the talk shows. Is there anything you didn't get to do?
Saturday Night Live.
Fair.
And I think that's because we were on tour at the time. Would have been around 2004. And I think we were just out there. We might have even been in Japan for what I remember. But yeah, I mean, you know, I feel lucky, or by osmosis, just being in the places where stuff was really, you know, taken off, whether it be London circa 90, you know, before Britpop, before Loveless, right? That's your sort of signpost there for the UK days. And then back to New York at Y2K, and all the bands busting up at the time, you know, out of New York, the Strokes, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, us, you know, getting to have, you know, Grammy noms and stuff. Yeah, I don't think any of us really expected it, but we certainly went along with it. Yeah,
you just called it out, but the Luna Lounge scene, the Lower East Side scene of the early 2000s of the Strokes and the Yeah Yeah Yeahs and the Interpols and all that. Right. You were there for that, and then 10 years before that, you were there for shoegaze before it was even called shoegaze. So in a way, it's kind of like this Forrest Gump-esque journey where, yes, he's a talented guy who's nice and pleasant and well-read. I don't think people really know how well-read you are, but you always seem to be there at the right time without any kind of a manager or person pushing you to be there.
You know, I mean, we do it all in our own time, really. It's like, if when it becomes a business, it can get in the way. And I'm really cautious about that, especially having learned my lesson, you know, in my early 20s or whatever, that it's nice to be nurtured, but if you get pushed out of the nest too soon, maybe it's not so good.
That's a really good way of looking at it. So
I think all of us in Fountains especially were happy to, you know, just be allowed to make the records we wanted to make without too much interference from the powers that be. And it was a happy enough working relationship. It also helped to have, you know, some really great management champion us. And so, you know, tour managers, even all that stuff, it made it a lot easier to do. All you had to worry about at one point or another was just waking up and getting to lobby call.
Well, Fountains of Wayne's management, now that I remember it, for at least the first two records, was the same people representing Metallica. Does that mean that Fountains of Wayne was on the radar of Metallica?
No. In fact, we were, I think, next to Veruca Salt, one of the first acts that Peter and Cliff, you know, managed from ground up. Say would inherit Madonna, Metallica, Courtney Love, whoever, and they were already pretty much established, you know. But Adam was always really good at sort of micromanaging the band, especially on tours. So, you know, he may have gotten a few more gray hairs than the rest of them.
Yeah, that was a smart businessman. And another thing that was interesting to me about Fountains of Wayne, besides the music being great, was how much you guys thumbed your nose at things, you know, not in a bitter, dark way, but just kind of a mocking the industry way. And people didn't always pick up on that. You take a song like Radiation Vibe, which sounded like a hit song, is making fun of a lot of people and a lot of things. And it was a hit, and you were on Conan on that song and all that. Yeah,
that's right. No, I think, you know, because we were in the game, we sort of played the game every 3 or 4 years. But I don't think anybody would accuse us of being the most prolific or ambitious band. We just sort of did it when we felt like it.
That makes sense. So
it worked because we kept making records. I don't know how many we made. It's so weird because, you know, I'm sitting here talking to you, and if we were doing an interview on, you know, the British invasion, I could tell you what year the Beatles or the Stones were based on their outfits, you know what I mean? Or their haircuts or something like that. As far as the records we made, I mean, I can maybe come within 2 or 3 years either side of what year it was actually released. But, you know, when we worked pretty hard and covered the world.
I think you had 5 studio records, a B-sides album, and like 1 or 2 EPs, if I know my stuff correctly.
You could be right. I mean, I would be the last guy to ask about that. But a lot of it, I came on board in '96, you know, after they had done the first record in a week. And,
in a week, yeah.
We stepped it up for the next one, but we toured that record pretty hard in '96 into '97. Like you said, we were doing the Pumpkins, opening act for the Pumpkins and stuff like that. So we went from like playing the Mercury Lounge, just, you know, to show the label people that we could actually play our instruments, to playing big places like Madison Square Garden or Nassau Coliseum all across the country. And that was kind of cool, actually, because I was like, I wonder if I'm going to be nervous for this, because I'd already done Reading with the Belltower and Glasgow and shit like that. In '91, the same year Nirvana really kind of took off from that actual festival. And the funny thing about it is the Belltower's playing the Mean Fiddler tent at the same time Nirvana's over here, right? And in between songs, I could hear, you know, the plaintive wails of Mr. Kurt Cobain coming from the main stage over this way, you know. And this next song is gonna go away, you know what I mean? And you know, we used to hang around with all those cats back in London when all of our American bands, I mean, the Pixies had already set the template for the cool Boston band.
Yeah,
you know, it was big in England and hadn't quite broken in America. So yeah, I mean, full circle for sure.
And putting all that together, I have to imagine that you've got a Rolodex that spans people of about 45 years of age, because if you were around the shoegazer people, then the power pop people, then you were in the mainstream for quite a while.
With power pop people?
Well, hey, Brian was in the Posies and all that. I have to imagine that it's this weird kind of existence where you're like the youngest old guy or the oldest young guy, depending on what circle or group you're hanging out in.
I was the youngest old guy in the band, that's for sure. I think those guys each have about 2 years on me. It's a crazy sort of a Beatle-esque situation with Brian coming on, you know, last like Ringo did, and being slightly older than. I mean, it was a great band to be in. Absolutely nothing that I regret about that. I kind of miss it, to be honest, obviously.
I can imagine. Everyone loved Fountains of Wayne, to say the least. And going back to your solo album and what's ahead and all that, are you also thinking of doing collaborative projects in general? Like, could we ever see a Jody Porter all-star band?
I could see that more than ever, really. I mean, what are we supposed to do until they come up with a vaccine? It's everybody's laying low, whether it's required or not. I don't think anybody except some of those lame-ass Creed type bands are going out right now. You know, I don't know. I shouldn't cite them. No issues. I don't want to get beat up by a Christian rock band. But long story short, some people are still doing these mass super spreader concerts and stuff, not too far from me. And I'm just like, no, I think I'll play it safe. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, like I said, things were different back then, and it was really all pursuant on how much we wanted to be out, which was totally up to us, you know. And talking to Brian with his gig with the Mary Chain right now, I know that they are booking festivals from last year for next spring. And then in all fairness, I think there's a good possibility that those will get backed up again. You know, I mean, shit, it's a weird time out there.
Well, I was reading a series of articles Rolling Stone has been doing as of late with people who are basically session players and sidemen for decades, like the drummer of Crosby, Stills and Nash and Billy Joel's sax player. And you hear these people talking, or at least you read their words, and you go, I didn't realize this person worked on all these records and did all these things. But then you start to realize due to the aging, to put it nicely, of our Ringos and our Mike Loves and all that, there has to be that next generation of touring attractions that we see. So what I'm getting at is, I think that we could see, whatever the name is, a band where it's like, well, there's Jody, and then there's a guy from Longwave, and there's a guy from Interpol, and there's a guy, and they each do their 3 hits and their cover, their all-star cover of the band and the Beatles, and everyone goes home happy.
Sign me up. I love the Beatles. I love Longwave and I love Interpol too, so that would make sense to me. We'd have to do it virtually until things change, though.
Unless you start planning 2 years ahead. You're the first band that announces a 2022 tour in late 2020.
Tell me about it. That's crazy. Exactly.
Well, any hobbies or things that you've picked up as of late that you've been focused on besides music?
Well, I've gotten pretty good at sleeping. You can also do things around here because we're in the mountains, like hiking, right? Which is basically walking up a hill, I think. What else? In the summer, there's all sorts of stuff like zip lines and tubing and whatnot. I didn't expect to be down here for this long. You know, once my record was done last February, or this February, I should say, you know, I kind of saw myself not buying a vehicle, maybe touring a little bit regionally and having somebody else do the driving, then promptly moving back to New York to kind of have it come out as a slightly less soft release, you know what I mean?
Makes sense to me. That, again, like you said before, every 2-3 years you wind up moving again and again. Almost like an album cycle, you have your moving cycle.
Yeah, and I always end up in the same places after 3 years anyway, you know, whether it be England or New York or LA. It just seems like that's where I'll find myself for another 2 years and then go back and change the backdrop.
Well, totally different wavelength, but something we wound up talking about, pulling the curtain back. We were talking about Kiss out of nowhere when we were talking on the phone the other day.
Yeah, I remember because you had interviewed Gene Simmons or something, right?
Yes, you had a great in-person interaction, which we'll keep off the record. I had a couple of great interviews over the last 3-4 years and a good in-person thing as well. But that's a part of your musical lineage that I know nothing about. You mentioned that Ace was actually an influence on you, but was Van Halen also an influence on you at all?
My mom liked Van Halen for some reason, and you wouldn't think she would. I mean, she's sort of straight up Mamas and the Papas era, but I never really got Van Halen that much. The guy is a terrific guitar player, R.I.P. Ed. Probably a really nice guy. I met him one time, I think, at the Grammys. And we talked shop for a minute or two. Kiss, I think I liked the baseball cards more than the cards more than the music, because he had a Les Paul like mine. I was like, well, let me, give me 25 cents, dude. I want to buy some Kiss cards so I can look at that guitar again. And that's how they got me, with those monsters that they were.
Yeah, so you graduated from Kiss straight to the right bands?
Honestly, I have to say that I did have some Kiss records, mind you, but I think they were borrowed. I spent all my money on Zeppelin, Stones, like what my dad didn't have, right? He, for some reason, had every Beatles record but Sgt. Pepper, so that was my 6th birthday present, as I recall. Then he was so awesome. If I had a kid, I'd have to do the same thing. He'd buy me records that he liked. Right. I remember I wanted a Kiss record, whatever year it was, must have been 78 when Some Girls came out, but he bought me Some Girls, and thanks for that. It was a better decision,
Probably. Although one of the Kiss records around then did have a Stones cover, so you probably would have gone
2000 Man.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
You would have gone to the same place anyway. So right. I guess summing it all up, you're waiting to see like everybody else is, but at least you got a great new record that's in the can. When's it coming out?
I think we're going to do it like in about 3 weeks' time, and then vinyl early in the new year.
Great. Self-release, or do you think your North Carolina comrades Red Eye might play a hand in it?
I have a new upstart label out of Berkeley, California called Rare Rock. And we're going to see where we can push it out to. You know, I've put out 2 singles so far just as a teaser to give sort of the signpost of where it goes. But I don't like separating the songs too much from each other, because without sounding like it's a concept album, it's got a theme to it. And all those songs are sort of related. So Rolling Stone premiered something and Spin premiered the other one. And, you know, it gives you an idea what the rest of the record is sort of going to do.
All these years later, Rolling Stone still likes you. I don't know how many people are beloved by the new Rolling Stone, but Jody Porter is.
Okay, well, I'll take what I can get.
Well, in closing, Jody, any
corporate magazines don't still suck. You know what I mean? It's a way to get the thing out there in people's ears.
I remember that T-shirt. Was that a Kurt Cobain shirt, or who?
Yeah. He drew it himself, I think, for the cover.
There you go. Well, my closer, Jody, any last words for the kids?
You know, keep doing what you're doing and keep breathing, man. I don't know what else to tell you. We'll come out and entertain you. I can speak for the rest of the musical contingent that I know, and we can't wait to get back out there.
I can imagine. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing what's coming next from you.
Right on, bro. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Have a good one.
Paltrocast.